That's being tossed between different governments. We have President Clinton trying to make overtures to the Cuban government and Fidel Castro trying to maximize what he's done for the last God knows how many decades. Immigration is playing hardball here. Usually they don't start any action to force somebody to do something unless they put in a proceeding. But they said, since we paroled you and we allowed you into the United States, we're going to make sure that you follow our instructions, regardless of how it will affect this child, which concerns me. Again, whether his mother parentally kidnapped the child or not, the fact is she felt it appropriate enough for him to remain on U.S. soil. Let's give him a day in court to see whether or not it's in his best interest.
Let's make this a family court issue. Take the politics out of it. What do you make of that now?
This case is certainly the cynosure of all eyes in the legal community. The heart and soul of this case is whether or not this is a custody case or whether or not this is a federal immigration case. Right now, since the government has been trying to appease 700,000 Cuban refugees and those who favor the position of keeping them here, they have taken a hard and fast position by ordering that he meets with the grandparents.
Well, do you find that wrong?
I don't find it wrong at all. He should meet with the grandparents, and everything should be done in the best interest of the child. However, the relatives in Miami who didn't want to meet with the grandmothers and who decided that they wanted to only meet with the boy in the home in Little Havana, the government said, look, he's been paroled into the United States, he's under our jurisdiction, and we're going to make certain that there's going to be a location where you're going to meet.
All right, so they meet.
Yes.
I guess what I wonder is, bring me inside that room. I mean, if, for example, the relatives from Miami are allowed to sit in on that, and that's up to some doubt here. I don't know if that is indeed the case. How would that go down?
Well, again,
I mean, what kind of productive meeting would this be then?
I think, again, this is all political posturing. They're trying to get a good photo op here. The Attorney General understands that it does not look good for grandmas to have come to U.S. soil, visited practically New York and Washington, the media states of our country, besides California, and not have even made an overture towards the young man. In all of this, where is the father? Why isn't the father in the room there? My theory has always been, let's get everybody into a courtroom. Let's hear from the grandmothers. Like Mr. Sachs says, it's wonderful. Let's get the children to actually sit down with their grandma, with their father. Let's bring the father's new wife, who's pregnant right now, onto U.S. soil. Give everybody a safe haven, the privilege of coming into the courthouse. I've represented women whose kids have been abducted. They're sitting now in embarrassment that the United States government, over a course of weeks now, has spent so much time, so much money, so much effort, when there are children that are overseas that are forgotten.
What if something wacky comes out of this, Mel? All of a sudden, Elian's with his grandmothers and says, you know, I do want to go back with you.
It's interesting that
And a neutral observer hears that.
Certainly. You know, it's interesting that you raised this issue. This is a 6-year-old. This is a minor. And under the law, it's recognized that individuals who are adults can make decisions. 20 years ago, when Edwin Meese was the Attorney General in the Reagan administration, a Soviet boy wanted to stay in the United States. Right. And he stayed in the United States. And the difference between that case and this one are the ages. This is a child who is unable to formulate a decision. He's in a situation right now.
But does it carry any weight if he does? I know I mentioned a hypothetical, but if he says, you know what? And this sister, Lachlan, is there hearing it, and he says, I want to go back to Cuba with you. I want to see my dad.
It's certainly a contributing factor. However, as Mr. Weil will tell you, in regard to these proceedings as to who should have custody of a child, you take into account what a father says, what a mother says. Unfortunately, the mother has passed away, and what other relatives say, and a determination is made what is in the best interest of the child, not what is in the best interest of the Clinton administration.
But normally the procedure in something like this is the kid would automatically go back to his natural-born parent, right?
Clearly, the government has a policy of family reunification. Sons belong with fathers.
So what makes this different?
What makes it different is, number one, we have a very different political law with Cuba. If you make it to our shores, you're given the opportunity after a year to apply for political asylum. Political asylum immediately, and then permanent residence a year down the road.
But we turn back a lot of people to make it to our shores.
We turn back a lot of people. The Haitians have been held historically in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, ironically. And unfortunately, it's a very political law. The State Department is replete with
So why should we be any different with this child?
We should not be different with this child. We should treat this as any international case. There are people that argue that this is a parental kidnapping and this belongs in a court. And yet there are people that are arguing that the act that she took by taking this child on a boat was so laudable that she was trying to get him into freedom. Let's at least honor her memory.
Well, you know, let's say we do
court.
honor her memory. We want to keep him here, right? But the law says, you know, you gotta send him back to his dad. I would imagine you would need SWAT teams to get in there and get that boy to go back to Cuba, right? It could get very ugly getting him out of there, right?
That's what the government here is trying to avoid, because that's
But is that what would happen? I mean, if we had to force the issue, get Elian back to Cuba, the fact of the matter is it could get very violent.
The federal government at this time could go right in, could actually take him and send him back to Cuba.
But that's not going to happen.
What this would do, what one of the lawyers in this case said, who was representing the extended family, is that Miami would be in ashes. And that's the reason why this has become a political tug of war. Cubans are treated in a different way. Since Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we allowed our shores to be open, and anyone who's not interdicted in the sea who reaches land could be paroled to the United States.
Well, we kind of drew a distinction with that in the late 70s, right, with all the Cuban prisons being emptied out here.
Yes,
right?
in the Mario boat lift situation. But we still right now have thousands upon thousands of people in prisons throughout the United States. And what's unfair about our immigration policy is the fact that there are so many individuals who are languishing in jails and who are not able to become resident aliens and citizens.
Okay, guys, can we just listen in a little early? We talked about some of the relatives involved here, including some of the relatives of Elian's in Miami. A couple of them were speaking to reporters about 40 minutes or so ago in Washington. Let's listen in.
I wanted to say that Elian right now is very scared. He knows that the grandmothers are here, but he wants to see them, but he's scared that they might want to take him. And I think that the world should know that Elian doesn't want to go back.
Michael Wilds, if that's what the boy said, a boy can change his mind, right?
Sure. I mean, this young man wants his mother back more than anything else on his mind right now. If you asked him if he wanted to go to Disney World or ice cream, he would want that too. We need to bring experts into a courtroom. The government of the United States is now forcing this young man to choose between being with his father and the freedom that his mother chose. But you see what I'm saying?
If we you guys are the expert lawyers here, but if we even do that, the
safe haven. We have the Lady Liberty a few blocks away standing there with her arms open.